Hello everyone, my name is Victor. I am the Occult Technician, and this is Mind War, Season 4, Episode 4.
Mind War is sponsored by Victory Work Apparel. Use promo code Mind War. Join the Mind War today. Enlist at patreon.com/mindwar. Now back to the show.
Welcome back to Mind War, folks. I appreciate you being here. We have a lot to cover today, so let's get started. Folks, we're going to pick up where we left off in the book Far Journeys by Dr. Robert Monroe. This is the second book in his 3-book trilogy. There is a link to this book in the description of this video. It can be found for free at archive.org, or of course you can pick it up from Amazon, which is what I did. So we are on now part 2, Far Reaches, okay? Chapter 7 is titled Surveys and Schematics. So let's see what Dr. Monroe says here. He says, on one particularly difficult attempt, I pulled back slightly, stopped trying, and examined the problem. My physical body appeared to be not one but two, much as when your vision is slightly impaired by astigmatism. They seemed very close to together, no more than 3 or 4 inches apart, one slightly behind the fainter than the other. I approached the nearest of the two slowly, slid into it very easily. I held this position for several moments. It seemed as if I were partially interspersed with the physical, yet not quite in phase. The condition had a familiarity that took me all the way back to the vibration I first encountered and the physical paralysis that went with it. The sensation was near identical, but without the panic. So, in the tape Living Body Map, remember we were seeing our physical body, we were seeing the silhouette of it, and that represented our physical body, and we healed it with our energy toolbar, our magic wand. But once we got done healing the physical, Dr. Monroe said, just beyond that, you're going to see a fainter version of it, and that is your emotional self. I want you to heal that version of you too. And I think maybe that's what he's talking about here, is that when we are returning to the physical body, we have to understand these different layers of ourselves, the physical, the emotional side of us. They all need to come back together. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I thought it was worth noting. So Dr. Monroe, throughout this chapter, basically, again, it's part of his dream journal. And he is talking about his interaction with an entity that he's become very familiar with, kind of a guide that is helping him through these experiences, right? Again, I'll let you read through those on your own. Some of it gets kind of strange, and that's fine. Those are his experiences. Again, not dogma. He's not a saint. We're not trying to say that you're going to have to contact the same entity that he did and have the same experiences. That's not it. You're going to have your own experiences, and we want to hear about them. But in the middle of this chapter, he drops some very interesting kind of self-help ideas. And remember, that's the main point of all of this. These tapes are for self-help. That's what the Mind War is. This is a self-help program. This is parallel to therapy, but instead of boring sitting on the couch or video chatting with somebody and all that nonsense, we are taking, again, that kind of rebel look at it. We are the mind warriors, the warrior monks, the citizen samurais, and the guerrilla gurus. We are doing this on our own, right? We aren't following the exact same path as everyone else. So it's important to, again, when we see some of these tips, I'm going to point them out because this part really doesn't kind of add with the rest of the chapter. But let's start here real quick. It says, the major underlying cause of human worry relates to the law of change. All human conflict relates to this law. Some worry that change will take place, others that it will not. Wars are fought to resist change or to accelerate it. At the individual level, this translates into various forms of indecision. Fear enters the pattern. Fear of the consequences of any decision or action. The pressure builds up, intensifies as the decision is put off and delayed. The results accumulate toxins in all parts of the human system until there is failure or severe reduction in operating efficiency. Indecision is the killer. I think we've all felt this before. There's things that we want to do or that we know that we need to do, but we can't quite get the courage and the motivation to do them. The fear starts to build up. Well, what if I do this? What if I don't do this? And the longer we delay making that decision, the anxiety and worry starts to build up and it becomes toxic within us and ultimately paralyzes us from making any decision. And that's what we are trying to change here in the Mind War, is when we get those gut feelings, when our intuition speaks to us, we have to act on it. There is no manifestation without imagination. We first have to be in a state of mind where we can imagine a better scenario. But without work, the manifestation doesn't occur either. Okay, so it's one thing to be indecisive. Then you're finally going to make a decision to do something, but you also have to act, right? And remember, not doing anything is also a decision. That is an action to stay stagnant, an action to stay stationary, and to wilt, and to disintegrate into nothing. That's what we're fighting against. And here is, like I said, kind of an out of context part of this chapter, but here are some great self-help tips. To move away from the null point of indecision, take the position that any action or decision is better than none at all, based upon the odds of 3-to-1. To get the process underway without trauma, perform the following. If you are stuck in a state of indecision, here are the steps that you can take to get out of it. Let's see. Make up an A list. Place on this list all of your worries, anxieties, and concerns about which you can do absolutely nothing. You cannot do anything about tomorrow's weather conditions. It will rain, snow, be cold or hot, and there is no action you can take to prevent it. If there is absolutely nothing you can do today about such items, place them on the A list. All of those worries, all of those concerns and anxieties that we have no control over them, you're going to write them down on your A list. You're going to have a piece of paper, title it A list. Those worries, concerns that you can't do anything about, you write them down there. Then you're going to make a B list. Place on this list all of your worries, anxieties, and concerns about which you can do something today. Take action, large or small. This is a very important list. Here you're going to write all those worries, concerns, and stresses, And you say, here's how I can fix them. Here are the actions that I can actually take today to make them happen. You've probably experienced this before. You spend several days worrying about this, that, and the other. All these things seem to be piling up on top of you, but you are indecisive and haven't taken action on any of them. You finally write your list down. You do the first thing on your list and you're like, holy shit, that only took 15 minutes. Okay, let's work on the next one. You knock that one off, boom, boom, boom. All of a sudden your list is done. You get it done in an afternoon where you had been stressing about it for days, weeks, months, however long. And all of a sudden you're like, wow, that was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. I've had days like that. They talk about how, I think this is kind of a phrase, right, where events in history can occur in a moment that will change, years, the next, several decades. And then there are decades where nothing happens, right? And sometimes that's what it is. We put things off, but then when we finally take action, we just knock them out of the park. And then we're going to make up the C list. And place on this list all of your needs, hopes, and desires, large or small, which have yet to be fulfilled. Okay, so now on the C list, we're moving away from worries, anxieties, and stresses, things that we feel like we have to get done. Now, C list, we're writing down those needs and hopes and desires, the things that we want, right? The things that we want to occur in our lives. And here's what we're going to do with these lists. Number 1, take the A list and destroy it. And in doing so, dismiss all items contained therein from your consciousness. Why waste your energy worrying about that which you cannot control? Okay? If you are caught up in our current culture and you're worried about politics or religion or sports or whatever it is, and these things are just constantly worrying you, it's what you seem to be thinking about all day, it seems to be the only conversation you have with anyone, write those things down on a list, along with all those other worries, anxieties, and concerns that you have no control over. That's your A list. You write those things down and then you destroy it. You burn that list because there's nothing you can do about those anyways. So stop worrying about them. It's huge. It's like when we put our worries, anxieties, and concerns in our energy conversion box and then we turn our back on it. Turning our back on those worries and concerns that we have no control over, it's so powerful. They lose any control that they have over us. Number 2, take the B list and take some action, however small, to begin the resolution of each item contained therein. Several may be concluded immediately, and thus can be released and dismissed from your consciousness. Others will be reduced in pressure because the flow has begun and a decision has been made. So again, that B list, those anxieties, worries, and concerns that you do have some control over. We just talked about that. You're going to start working on things in that list and they're just going to start melting away. They're going to be achieved and accomplished, and you're going to succeed at those things so much faster than you thought you would. You spent 10 times the amount of time worrying about this thing than you did to actually resolve it. Many of those things are going to melt away, and along with them, the anxiety and concern. And for those things that are long-term that you have to deal with, the pressure is going to start to release because at least some action has been taken, right? You've moved forward a little bit. You've taken the first step on the journey to resolving whatever that issue is. And when you do that, all the pressure of the anxiety, worry, and concern about that issue starts to melt away because you say, there's the tunnel, there's a light at the end of it, I'm going to work my way towards that. And number 3, take at least one item on the C list and perform one act, large or small, that moves you in the direction of such goal. That C list, that is your That is the tool you're going to use to motivate yourself. That is the prize that you're working for. That is the treat that you're working towards in your life. That thing that you want, that you desire, right? No matter how big or small, those needs, those hopes that you have, those things that are external from the worries. Again, a lot of those worries are going to be paying the bills, stuff like that, fixing something in your home, whatever it may be. Whatever those issues are, those you can deal with. But now this is more the hopes. Now we're going to better ourselves. We're going to add something into our life that makes us better. And this is the goal, what we're working towards. So again, list A, those things that we can do nothing about, we destroy that list. Quit worrying about it. There's nothing more to worry about because you can't do anything about it. Number 2, that list, that B list, those things that you do have control over but are still worrisome, you're going to write those things down and you're going to start accomplishing them, even if it's just the first step, right? And then step C, you're going to reward yourself for your hard work. And you're going to take even the smallest bit of action towards rewarding yourself with something beautiful and amazing that you want to work towards and achieve, right? Something good that is going to be added into your life, okay? That was it, folks. That was, just such an interesting piece out of a very strange chapter. Because again, Dr. Monroe then starts going into all sorts of strange stories, right? Oh, here, let me finish this up here. It says, perform this entire process each day until you have no A list, no B list, and all of your energy and consciousness are devoted to items on your C list. Okay? That's a great way to do it. I try to spend the majority of my time living from the C list, working towards the C list. Everything that you see here, the art, the podcast, the Instagram, the YouTube, all of these things are on my C list. These are things that are positive in my life, that create growth and healing and excitement. And I'm so proud to come down here and do for all of us, right? That is my C list. There's still the B list out there. I still got to pay taxes and do paperwork and all kinds of stuff, but I don't put as much worry and concern on those things anymore. And as far as that A list, I burned that a long time ago. I just honestly do not worry about the things I can't change. Now I honestly kind of just sit back and laugh at it, right? And that's a beautiful feeling too. But again, there's always going to be things that you're going to have to deal with, and that's okay. Sometimes that B list might come back. But one of the ways that I personally have been able to achieve this is by simplifying my life. I know that this has come with old age, right? Again, I'm in my mid-40s, so I'm this old guy now. And I find that by simplifying my life, things are much easier. There's much less worry and concern. Now, this might not fit into everyone else's life. If you're a younger person and you have all sorts of drive and all of these things, that's great. Continue to do that. And in fact, become even more successful and powerful by joining the Mind War today. Enlist at patreon.com/mindwar and look for the top secret folder where we work on all sorts of laws of power that can help us become more powerful in our daily lives. Again, if you're that young person who's striving for more, right? But again, for me, I found that just living simpler, I have much less worry and concern, right? Okay, so again, I'll let you read through some of this stuff where Dr. Monroe is talking to these other kind of entities, these guides that he works with. There's an interesting paragraph here. It says, if you've never been to a particularly exotic place or to a locale that at least to you seems exotic and exciting from your distant viewpoint, there is much anticipation. You can conjure up any number of possibilities as to what you will do and experience. In your eagerness, you are willing to accept all sorts of limitations and restrictions. These seem unimportant from the outside. Also, you forget one most important factor. You take along as hidden extra baggage your own enculturation as a comparative tool of measurement. Okay, so what we're talking about here is Dr. Monroe found himself he had some very exciting experiences, and he was trying to recreate those. And he found that while he was trying to get back into this state of being to where he could have these experiences again, he was finding difficulty in it because he was so excited to have the experience. He was almost finding himself being too eager. And in his eagerness, he was placing limitations on himself, right? He was kind of trying to fit himself into this box that was defined by our five senses, instead of allowing himself to say, no, I can't abide by those rules anymore because I'm not in the physical body. I need to relax and allow myself to just experience this in the form, that we're going to experience these things. Because again, it's not through the five physical senses. It's different. It's a different way of sensing and feeling and perceiving. So let's see. He goes on. All sorts of communication with his buddy there. So let's see what we have here. One of the principal examples came one night when I rolled out of the physical, and before I could release from the second body, an overwhelming drive of sexual union rose in me. Okay, folks, so Dr. Monroe has talked about these desires before and how they can be distracting. So let's see what he has to say here. Let's see. I was about to employ my usual not now but later cooling technique when I moved away sharply with a sudden shift. Okay. So again, in the past, he's talked about how if you have physical desires, whatever they may be, start to happen while you're trying to relax and get into the out-of-body state, those physical desires are going to pull you back into it, okay? Some of it's going to be things like I've talked about before. Your feet are too cold. If your feet are cold, it's going to anchor you down to your physical body. If you have a full bladder and you need to use the restroom, that's going to anchor you and pull you back down to the physical, right? It's going to take you out of the state of relaxation. Same thing with sexual desires. They can pull you back into the physical, or you can harness them and allow them to happen, right? And appreciate them for what they are and experience and explore them in the out-of-body state, right? But what Dr. Monroe is about to explain here is very interesting. He goes on to a locale where he starts to kind of see something, and it's as we read through it, it's a very interesting description. Again, this is his dream journal. I'm not saying that we are going to experience these things, but I thought it was so interesting that we should look at it. Okay, so again, he's going into the out-of-body state, but he had a strong sexual desire, and this is what happened. I was about to employ my usual not now, but later cooling technique when I moved away sharply with a sudden shift. So normally he would just say, listen, I understand that desire. I'm going to deal with it later. But he couldn't. This one pulled him in deeper. The movement was fast and short. When I was able to perceive, I found I was standing a few feet away from an enormous pile of writhing forms. Okay. An enormous pile of writhing forms. It reached up, slanting back as high as I could see in each direction, right and left. It swept off into the distance. It reminded me of nothing so much as the interweaving of huge fishing worms in the bottom of a can after being left out overnight. The motion was continuous, thousands upon thousands, each wet, slippery form wiggling in and out among the others in the pile, searching, trying to do something, but never achieving satisfaction. So he's standing there. You can visualize it almost as a movie, and he's looking out just in every direction, seeing this massive form of these things just writhing and writhing and just slimy things just moving all around each other, working through each other. And he said, 3 perceptive shocks hit me simultaneously. The forms were not worms. They were human. Second, the incredible, staggering radiation of sexuality, both male and female, that emanated from the seething mass. And third, they all were physically dead. So what he was seeing was this mass of what seemed to be human spirits slithering and sliming around each other in just this most intense sexual desire and drive. We've seen this depicted in movies and art, almost like hell, right? I wanted to turn and run, but some other part of me held me in place. I finally calmed down enough to become analytical. Did I want to join in? Oh my goodness. Was he going to give in to his desires and dive into this pile of thousands of slippery, wet, wiggling, human spirits trying to search for some type of satisfaction? My whole being shuddered in rejection. No vestige remained of the sexual drive I had found so important just moments before. I had the strong precept that it would come again, but never where I would control wholly what I thought or did. With this flash of knowing, another emotion washed over me. Intense compassion for those trapped in the undulating mass. So focused and intent on seeking sexual satisfaction, they were unaware of any other existence. Anger at a system that could so inhabit, repress, and distort as to create the situation in front of me. Were these the cast-offs of the human process to remain so throughout eternity? Oh, man. That is literally those descriptions that, again, we see in the movies of hell, of this piles of bodies just swarming themselves and just trying to dramatically achieve some type of sexual satisfaction that never occurs. And he's saying, is this that hell? Am I seeing these spirits who were so driven by sexuality in their life that when they died, that's all they continued to focus on? And their souls throughout eternity are going to be trapped in this mass, this undulating mass of humanity. Holy shit. I mean, that's wild. I mean, again, this is Dr. Monroe's dream journal. This is the stuff that he saw. I've never seen anything like this, but I thought that is such a wild story. We had to cover it. Again, in such a strange chapter. This chapter is called Surveys and Schematics, where I thought, oh, well, that sounds kind of scientific. But again, we had a section on self-help, making our lists. We have this whole conversation between Dr. Monroe and his spirit guide. And then now we're talking about this sort of hell that he's stumbled upon. Very interesting chapter. That was Chapter 7, Surveys and Schematics. Okay, let's jump into Chapter 8, Contact Point. And again, remember, these books are written not only like Dr. Monroe's dream journals, what he's experiencing when he listens to the tapes, but all of the volunteers that he had at the Gateway program. And a lot of the questions that he talks about, and a lot of these thought processes that he's having, they're sort of existential. You know, what is the meaning of life? Why are we here? What are we doing, right? And that's very important. That's part of this journey. That's why it's called Far Journeys. This is this exploration that as humans we all should go through. We should explore these questions on our own. And again, the answers that he gives are not necessarily the answers that you are going to be given. But it's important as we work through these things just to kind of use them as a guide, right? Oh, here's some of the experiences that other people had. Here's some of the familiarities between all of our experiences, right? So again, chapter 8, contact point. I went back through my notes all the way to the beginning. I was astounded that I had ignored what was so apparent. A helping hand, helping me get out, a hand on my arm, a response to my anguished screams and the more subtle clues apparent from my own perspective. I had called them helpers at the time and let it go at that. At the minimum, I had not turned my activities over to my greater self, but to them, whoever they were. Thereafter, during active out-of-body experiences, I tried many times to communicate with these presences, singular or plural, to no avail. Correction. I thought I received no reply because no words were forthcoming, only pictures, sensations, and action. The change came about when I dimly began to realize I wasn't speaking their language, as it were. Review of my early notes supported this for the most part. Words and language as we know them are strictly human. The interference was obvious to me, being human. My deflated ego rose somewhat with the realization that whatever my communication method was, a response was coming from these non-humans. With this awareness, I continued to ask and let them do the driving and navigating during my out-of-body states. For one simple reason, the process had been working. Whoever they were, they certainly knew the territory far better than I. Each time, though, I attempted another type of communication and it began getting results. I directed wordless thoughts, pictures, activities, feelings, and emotions to the supposed presence behind me. Each time there was an immediate response of like quality. It took some analytical and subjective attitudes combined to comprehend what I received. It was painfully slow on my side, astoundingly patient on theirs. Out of it came the rudiments of what we now call nonverbal communication. It was a milestone in my consciousness. I knew then that nonverbal communication exists, and I knew the difference, not much more. So, again, Dr. Monroe was attempting to communicate with his spirit guides, whatever they may be, whether it is just another part of us that we are communicating. Is it our total self that we are just giving our consciousness up to and saying we are allowing our soul to guide us, right? And he's saying that when you're trying to communicate with these entities or these other parts of us, sometimes, or he's found, you cannot communicate to them with words. You can't speak to them. Instead, he says that he would send pictures, activities, feelings, and emotions, okay? That's how he would communicate with them. He would send a picture to them, or an action that he wanted to perform, or an emotion or a feeling that he was having, and they would respond in like. That was their form of communication with him. It's like looking deeper into yourself. in understanding your own emotions, understanding your own feelings, and getting a better and truer sense of who you really are, right? We don't do that. We don't communicate with ourselves in that way through words, right? We allow the emotions and feelings to occur. I thought that was important. Again, that nonverbal communication will come more into play in future episodes. So let's go on here. It says a favorite quick and learn forever method of theirs was simulation. It was based on their ability to create and place into a human consciousness an Earth-type situation so real and so overwhelming that I could not tell reality from illusion. I don't know the limits of such simulation technology, nor do I know the extent to which they employ the technique. It may be only in my own particular case, but I doubt it. The potentials of its application in other ways begs for broad speculation. So, what he's talking about here isn't the simulation that we hear, people talking about today, like we live in some kind of video game, right? But instead, he's saying, when you're having the out-of-body experience, when you are actively working with these other entities, whether it be a spirit that's outside of you or you're working with yourself, that shadow self, right? And they are trying to teach things to you. One of the ways that they do it is through a simulation. And this is going to be a dream-like thing. They're going to put you through a dream. You're going to experience that dream as if it were real. You know what I'm talking about here. When you have that nightmare and you wake up in the middle of it, you wake up covered in sweat, shaking, afraid, because the dream that you were just having was so real, where that monster was chasing after you and you were attempting to run, but you couldn't. Everything was like molasses. You couldn't run. You couldn't find the exit. And there was so much fear that it woke you up out of this deep sleep, right? That felt real. It looked real to you. It was 4K, 8K. It seemed so real. And that's what we're talking about here is when we get into this out-of-body experience, when we get into the sleep dojo and locales beyond, and we are trying to learn more about ourselves, whether it's from our shadow self or some other spirit that is coming down to work with us, they can do it through simulation and it's going to feel like a dream. And he goes on to talk about how this can reoccur over and over and over again, like a video game almost, right? I think there's a movie with Tom Cruise that does this, some kind of future movie, right? Where he continuously goes back over and over and over again to practice and train until he gets the situation right. And I think that's what Dr. Monroe is talking about here. I thought that was interesting that he just used the term simulation, and I know we hear that quite a bit, right? So let's keep going here. He says here, this was becoming an event not anything like what I expected. I was rapidly losing my sense of awe. It was replaced with a great feeling of warmth, of understanding, much on the old order of old deep friendships, yet filled with intense respect. Not the usual pattern of expected angels, if that is what they were. So in this section, Dr. Monroe is talking about how he met some type of entity that he described as a very tall, human-like figure that was literally made out of radiating white light. And he was communicating with it and learning from it. And he said that over time, he actually lost his sense of awe, right? So again, when you first come in contact with these type of things, they are awe-inspiring. They are awesome. They're bright and brilliant and amazing. And maybe there's fear and curiosity and excitement, right? But over time, he became more familiar with them. So those feelings started to subdue, but they were replaced with, again, feelings of warmth and understanding. That is the beauty of what we're doing here. Whether it's, any type of entity that you might interact with, again, for me, it was just the spirits of my grandparents. I felt warmth and understanding and love and acceptance. And he says here, much on the order of an old, deep friendships. That's an amazing way to describe it. And it was filled with intense respect. And he said, it's not quite necessarily the angels. And this is part of Monroe's communication with this entity. And the entity says back to him basically, hey, we can grow wings and put on a halo if that's what you want. You know, we can come in whatever form that you need. And he said, no, you don't need wings and a halo. I don't need that. But if you're someone who does, then that's what you're going to experience, right? Again, it's your imagination. This is your imagination creating these things from deep down inside you. What's important to you. That's the beauty of it. We go on here. It says, it is difficult to express in your terms. So now this paragraph here, we're going to read through it. This is the entity speaking back to Dr. Robert Monroe. It is difficult to express in your terms. Consider the structure of physical matter as various forms. Moving inward, you have now subconstructs as atoms. These in turn have many organizations of particles that result in distinctive patterns. Your scientists have begun to understand the energy relationship of these particles. They have begun to perceive the spinning of the particle itself. It is the creative force that produces such spinning which we have in common. So this entity is now talking to him about how we are made up, what we have in common between these entities and ourselves, right? And he brings it down like we talked about in the last episode, right down to the atom. The atom communicates and coordinates with other atoms and the structures that it's made out of through vibration, through frequency, through energy. It's what holds us all together. If that force of energy, that vibrational frequency stopped in me right now, if I was able to shut it off like a light switch, my body would either just melt or explode into, however many atoms, the trillions of atoms that I'm made out of. It would just disperse out into the universe. Maybe, like I said, I'd melt into a blob. Who knows? But it's that energy that keeps us as solid matter. And here's a great way to think of it. Very simply, water. Okay? When water is boiling, you apply heat to it. The reason that the water starts to boil is because the molecules, the atoms of the water are energized and now they are bouncing off of each other. That's what creates the boiling water. You see it boiling. You see the bubbles being made. And here's the amazing part. That's what makes it hot when you touch it. It's just the fact that these atoms are active and moving around. And simply because of that, when you put your hand into it, now it burns. It burns you. It could destroy you, right? That is heat, energy. Or we take it to the other extreme, and now it is frozen water, okay? And that means that the atoms are no longer moving. They have no energy. And what's amazing is when you apply heat to water and it boils, the atoms become chaotic. They're all over the place. But when you freeze water and you take away that energy, now they start to create structures. Squares, they connect to each other in all sorts of different shapes, right? And that's what freezes them and makes them now hard. It's very interesting. It's very complex, but we have to look at these things in a very simple way, right? And I think water is a great way to explain that type of energy. It's a way that we can see it in our real lives and we can see it in front of us. You can have a pot of boiling water and a tray full of ice cubes sitting next to it, and you can see how energy really works. And that's the energy that makes our body It holds it together. It allows us to operate in the physical world. And it's also that energy that makes up our spirit body, our second state body. And it's that energy, that frequency that we have in common with these entities. It is where we are all kind of one together. I know this sounds hippy-dippy. I know it sounds wild, but it's again, we don't always have the words for this, but it's the best way to try to explain what we're doing here. He goes on to say, during the next several weeks, the press of daily physical activity plus the eagerness and excitement in my anticipation kept me from another meeting. So he was so eager to meet with this entity again. He said, I had difficulty in getting into the required pre-sleep. However carefully I approached the out-of-body release point after I did get relaxed, I couldn't get into the out-of-body state. And after repeated effort, I did no more than fall asleep. I realized I was forcing it too strongly, but it was hard to control. Finally, I gave up trying for the moment, and then it happened easily. So again, if you are too eager to have these experiences, you might miss steps in your preparatory process. You might be, instead of getting into focus 10, you're thinking about this experience that you're about to have, this meeting with this entity, right? And you're so excited to ask it questions or have an experience with it that you're not doing all the steps that you need to do. And he was saying, listen, I just couldn't get into it. I was so excited, I couldn't get into the out-of-body state properly. And the reason I added that in is because, again, this is after 20 years of him doing this. If you are having troubles and you're not experiencing the tapes the way that you want to, understand that it happens to all of us. I've already told you before, there's multiple tapes I had to listen to multiple times. Things just kept happening, right? So that's very important. Don't beat yourself up. Try again. Add the enhancements, okay? So let's continue on here. Again, a lot of conversation between him and these other entities. Basically, in this chapter, he talks more about he had contact with the spirit of a friend. He had a musician friend like 20, 30 years before in his life who had passed, and he believes he had made contact with him, and he was communicating and experiencing with him. Very interesting chapter. I'll let you read through that part. But then to finish up chapter 8 here, which was called Contact Point, he says this: I turned, dove inward, indent into my physical body, and re-entered without incident. I sat up in bed, then got up, put on a bathrobe, and went out onto the deck. It was a clear night, quiet and warm. I was still unsure as to how or why it happened, but I had no doubt as to the reality of the experience. If I encountered it and knew it, how many more thousands of human beings living right at this time point on Earth also have gone through the same or similar pattern? If they have, to whom would they even tell it? And the other training centers on planets circling those billions of stars tied to us by an intelligent energy field common to us all, were they as unaware as we? I felt very small looking at the stars and beyond, but not alone, never alone. That was chapter 8, contact point. That end there, I think that's important. There's been so many nights where I finished listening to the tapes and have these just amazing experiences. And sometimes it's difficult to even understand what just happened. You really have to take the time to allow it to soak in. You want to consciously go back and try to think about it. It's almost like thinking about a dream after you've had it. You want to write things down, take your notes, right? And I love that time when I go out, it's in the middle of the night because I often do the tapes later at night. I'll go out. The city is just quiet, you know. Maybe I'll roll a joint and go out inside and smoke and just relax and calm down a little bit and just reflect on what just happened. And that's a beautiful time. It's a time of serenity and peace and calmness, and it's a great experience. I hope all of you are enjoying as well. So again, that was Chapter 8, Contact Point, and Chapter 7, Surveys and Schematics, from the book Far Journeys by Dr. Robert Monroe, the second book in his 3-book trilogy. And we are going to dive into Wave 3 Freedom, Tape 4, 5 questions, after a word from our sponsor. Mind War is sponsored by Victory Work Apparel. Use promo code Mind War. Welcome back, folks. So we are going to go through Wave 3 Freedom, Tape 4, 5 questions. So Dr. Monroe starts with our preparatory process. We are going to build our resonant energy balloon. And we are going to move into Focus 10, the 10 state, and he will join us there. Now from Focus 10, we move into Focus 12 as he guides us, as he counts from 10 to 12. He says, 10, 11, your awareness is expanding more and more, far beyond the limits of your physical body. Your consciousness is expanding far, far beyond the limits of your physical reality. And then he says 12, you are now in Focus 12, the state of expanded awareness. Okay, so we get into Focus 12, that state of expanded awareness where we are thinking and perceiving outside of our physical body. Then he says the mantra. He says, say in your mind, say to yourself, I am more than my physical body. And then he reads through the mantra. And he talks about, as we've heard before, the importance of wanting to communicate with people or entities or things out there that have the same equal amount of knowledge or greater amounts of knowledge. And we want to welcome them in to express that knowledge to us. And he also goes on to say if there are any entities or any consciousnesses out there that are trying to harm us or deceive us, that those things are blocked and that we will have the help that we need to block those things out. It's very interesting. It's very encouraging, right? It gives you confidence that you're going to have good communications. And he says, you will now ask 5 questions into this expanded awareness in Focus 12. So when you ask the questions, again, you're in Focus 12, your perception and your awareness is expanded out in all directions. And when you ask these questions, you send it out. You send it out into the universe and allow the answers to come back. He says, here is the first question. Put it into the far reaches of your awareness. Ask this question, who am I? And wait for your answer. So I'm not going to try to go into too much detail about all of the answers that I received because a lot of it will be answered in future seasons, but I'm going to do my best here. For that first question, very comforting answer. The answer to who am I was very simple. My name is Victor. I am the occult technician, host of the Mind War podcast, star of this 7-year art project, and it felt very good being reassured that's who you are. You are on the right path. You're doing what you need to be doing. It says, now here is the second question. Where and who was I before I entered this physical being? So for me, when I asked this question, well, first two things happened. Number one, this is Wave 3, Tape 4. The copy that I have at the 20-minute mark when this question came up had some weird static, and it really took me out of the tape. It lasted for about 10 to 15 seconds. I let it play through, but it was very jarring. It was just kind of this weird electric static. I thought maybe it was because my phone was receiving a text or something like that, but I went back and played it again later on in the evening, and I still heard that static. So it's something with my copy that I recorded from YouTube. Again, links to the Gateway Experience tapes can be found in the description of this video from other channels on YouTube. When you find a good copy, I implore you to make your own, because again, the hemi-sync folks that are copywriting these tapes are asking so much money. The last time I checked, it was $700. They were on sale for $550 for all of the waves, and I think that's pretty wild. But so let's go on here. Who and where was I before I entered the physical being? For me to answer this question, the very first thing that I did was think of my own father. And I had spent a lot of time with my father just the day before. And we were enjoying a wonderful Independence Day dinner at my parents' home with family and neighbors. It was really great. And my father was sitting to my right side. And so in my mind, I pictured him. I had seen him there for several hours while we were enjoying great conversation. So I simply visualized him. Again, that kind of visual electrical signals that happen in your brain that you can easily recall, right? So I pictured him. And then I pictured my grandfather, who I'd spent a lot of time with, right? That's where I share the name Victor with, was from my grandfather. And now I've never met my great-grandfather or any of the men that came before him, but in front of me, it was as if I had seen the long line of men that I have come from. And that's where I was before, right? There is a connection from one man to the next as we are born. And it's not just men, of course, ladies too, right? But there's that connection from those where we had come from. And now, without trying to get too much into detail and try to make things too convoluted, for me, it was coming from the tribe of Dan, and that'll make sense here in a moment. Now, here is the third question. What is my purpose for this existence in physical reality? So, with this one, it really starts with my childhood best friend. He goes by the name of Daog now. You may have heard me talk about him in past episodes, or if you want more information on this, you can find my playlist, My Magical Year, on YouTube, and you can look for the videos that are called 13 Tribes. There are multiple parts. My friend Daog, he used to be called Joey, right? But he changed his name because he is, for the last 25 years, been a member of a Judeo-Christian cult called 12 Tribes. You can find them at 12tribes.org. And my purpose, one of my thoughts here was, again, they believe in 12 tribes, but there was a 13th tribe. And this is all historical, biblical information, right? He believes he is part of the 12 tribes of Israel, right? You can find it in the Bible. And there was a 13th tribe called the tribe of Dan that was kicked out. And they became what we know of as the Vikings today. And they went and conquered Europe, and they were practicing black magic. They were practicing occultism the same way that I do, and we will talk about that in future seasons as we get into the spiritual side of the mind war. And there is that connection to the tribe of Dan from where I came. And one of the prophecies of the Bible is that one day the tribe of Dan will rise again and become the judge of the 12 tribes of Israel. And that is, when it comes for me, what is my purpose for this existence and physical matter reality? That is part of what this art project is. Raising up the tribe of Dan. My first name is Daniel, so this is even closer, right? The tribe of Dan, in order to judge this cult that my friend is a member of. And the goal of the tribe of Dan will to sit back and judge them from afar and show the world who they truly are. And they are not great folks, okay? There's something very dangerous and evil about them. They put on the front, just like any cult does, of happy, wonderful, loving people. And these aren't like regular cults. They're not in a compound in one location, right? They are all over the world. They have locations all across America, Europe, South America, all over the world. They run these yellow delis. That's how they make their money. And that plays into the next question. The fourth question is, what action can I now take to best serve this purpose? Okay, so the action that I have been, that I received was actually these kind of thoughts and plans that I already had in place, where I've been attempting to communicate with Deog, sending him letters or communicating with him through the Gateway Experience tapes, right? Trying to reach out to him. But it's very difficult. I'm not getting much back from him. Of course, there are a lot of rules in this cult, and communicating with the outside world is one of those things that they don't really allow you to do, right? So not only are the actions are for me to try to get his attention, but also when, my hope is to be reunited with him. I would love to see him come out of this cult after 25 years. And one of the things that the cult does, again, I mentioned they run restaurants called the Yellow Deli. And the way that they are able to survive is that the members of the cult do not get a paycheck. They work tirelessly day in and day out for this corporation, but they don't get a salary. So one of my thoughts is, again, I don't mean to give away too much. All of this will be talked about in future episodes, and I don't want to confuse you here, but one of my hopes is that my friend Deog, or he used to go by Joe, when he gets out of the community, maybe we can sue them for 25 years of his labor for not being paid. Maybe we can sue them and regain that money that he should have been paid for all of his hard work. So these were some of the messages that I was receiving. These are some of the things you need to do. You need to continue your letter writing campaign, which I've already done. And now I have the next phase in that letter writing campaign is going to start here very shortly. So these are some of those actions. And then now it says, here's the fifth question. What is the content of the most important message I can receive and understand at this point in my existence? And again, it stayed with this theme of reconnecting with my friend Joe, having him come out of the cult and no longer be called Deog. Now is a crucial time because the childhood home that he lived in when we were children, the home that I met him at when I was 5 years old, 40 years ago. I believe it was just purchased by a construction company who are going to remodel it, and hopefully it will be back on the market soon. And I would love to be able to have that home purchased for my friend in order for him to come out of the cult and live there, and we can reunite. Now, the message that I received is this can be real, but we have to put these actions in place to make it real, right? Again, we've talked about this. There is no manifestation without imagination. I've been imagining these things happening, but there is no manifestation without action. So I put these things into action. I've already sent the letters to Joe. He hasn't responded, so now I wrote a new set of letters, and we'll be sending them out to others in order to get his attention. But that was really what I received. And the ideas and the things that I have in store for us, if he does get out, if I can pull him out of that organization, it is so corrupt, it is so strange. They say they're built on love, but you see the hate in them. If I can pull him out of there, I think amazing things can happen. And I want to reunite with him and build something new. Now, Dr. Monroe says, you will understand and remember the answers that you have received when you return to full physical waking consciousness. And that's what I did. As soon as I woke up from this tape, I had already written the questions on a piece of paper, and I literally went into almost kind of a hypnotic writing. I just started writing, right? I wasn't even conscious. It was almost as if my hand was doing the writing for me. It was writing down all the things that I needed to remember, the things that I just tried to express to you. I know it sounds confusing, and I hope I didn't spoil anything, spoiler alert, but we're going to go deep into this in future seasons of Mind War after we work through the gateway experience, and then we work through how we add spirituality into it. That's going to be several seasons, and then we're going to move into exploring the 12 tribes. He says, now you will move now from focus 12 back to focus 10. Says you are now back in focus 10, where your mind is bright and awake and your body is calmly and comfortably asleep. Feel calm and comfortable in focus 10, the 10 state. You will return now to full physical waking consciousness by the method you have learned. Begin it now, right? So that's Dr. Monroe wakes us up. So that was Wave 3 Freedom, Tape 4, 5 questions. The 5 questions are, who am I? Where and who was I before I entered this physical being? What is my purpose for this existence in physical matter reality? What action can I take to best serve this purpose? And what is the content of the most important message I can receive and understand at this point in my existence? This message goes out to all of those people who are looking for their purpose. I tell the young people in my lives who are struggling with this right now, and there are so many that come to me for answers, and I keep telling them, here's where you're going to find it. Quit asking me to give you the answer to what your purpose in your life is, okay? I can't tell you. Only you can tell you. The problem is we have cultural, societal structures put upon us that hamper our imagination. Then we have the worries and anxieties of just dealing with normal life. Those hamper our imagination. Those force us back into these low vibrational lives where we're just surviving. That's why we do the Gateway Experience tapes. To remove those barriers from our consciousness, from our hearts, and allow us to find our true purpose. And that's what this tape does. This is not a tape that you're going to listen to over and over and over again. You are going to work tirelessly through wave 1, through wave 2, and the first few tapes of wave 3. And when you are ready, then you're going to listen to tape wave 3, tape 4, 5 questions. Again, this isn't one you're going to revisit over and over. Okay? This is one that's very important. This is equal to tape 1-4, where you deal with your fears. This is equal to tape 2-1, 1 month patterning. You don't go into that tape with your mind wildly thinking about all kinds of things. You go in with a purpose. And that's what Wave 3, tape 4, 5 questions is also very important, very crucial. You're not going to listen to it often. And when you do, you're going to do it with purpose and preparation. And you want to make sure that this is one that you're really going to be able to experience. Another great episode. I appreciate you being here, folks. And as always, remember, harden your hearts and open your minds, because this is Mind War.